All right, we are live. Should be all ready to go. It's Monday, which means it's stream day. Or sorry, Wednesday. I don't even know what day it is anymore. It's Wednesday. It's another streaming day this week. Today we're doing something a little different. Uh, we're going to be sketching my favorite animal. We're going to be doing different poses and talking about what I think about when I draw these guys. Gorillas are my absolute favorite animal. I'm just always fascinated by them. Whenever I see them at Animal Kingdom or other uh, zoos or exhibits or even just documentaries, I'm just always fascinated by these creatures. So, what we'll be doing today is uh, I encourage you to draw along with me. I've got photo reference on the side here. If you're on Instagram, you won't be able to see it, but you'll be able to see the drawing. If you want to follow along with video reference, you can hop over to my YouTube channel or my Twitch channel um, and follow along on there. Uh, Same handle, JWK Creates. And let's go ahead and find the right kind of pencil here. Going to do the broad. We'll test it out just to make sure it's what I want. Not exactly. Let's do mechanical pencil. What does that look like? It's a little more sketchy, but it's got some textures I don't like. How about this one? That one's okay. That one's kind of nice. That one's a little too laggy. Too thin. What's hard look like? More like an airbrush. I think that's the pencil I was using before. I think that one might be the winner. Actually, that was not so bad. Yeah, I like that one. Okay, so sketching gorillas. We've got the photo reference here on the right. Wanted to start with kind of a profile. So looking at it from a completely side angle. Um, so thinking about the gorilla, if we look at the head shape, it's almost got like a overall oval kind of shape if we break it down as a whole, right? What's the main shape in here? It's going to be a oval. Now you can do the traditional, Loomis head structure with the circle at the top where the base of the face is, and kind of use that for your markers and build off of that if you like. But I'm just thinking about this photo reference on the side, and the basic structure is very much an oval. Now, if we were doing that circle, it's actually going to extend out a little bit more, right? If we're taking a look at this head structure, actually comes out a bit farther than the main oval that we're looking at. I'm firmly a believer in anybody can draw anything if they break it down into smaller shapes. So it's not so much how to draw gorillas or how to draw skyscrapers or how to draw plants or how to draw cars. It's what shapes can you see when you look at that item and what's the best way to break it down. So, looking at this shape, right, it's got even a little bit more of an extension that comes off the top. So we're going to do kind of a extension of that oval up this way. Okay. And then looking down here, thinking about another shape at the bottom where the chin is. And this one's kind of like a, how would we call it? It's kind of like a rectangle, a rounded rectangle. For this bottom lip. The lip juts out a little bit and it curves back. The upper lip is a little bit like a Hershey kiss up to where the fur comes in, right? So we got this rounded curve here that swoops up. Comes back down. Loops in over here. See how it's got that Hershey kiss kind of shape? And I'm going very light, especially if you're using regular paper. I have a little bit more freedom on a digital tablet where, you know, if I make a mistake, I can just undo. But if you're working on a regular piece of paper, you're definitely going to want to draw lightly so that your marks can be easily corrected, erased, or even drawn over differently. That way nothing you draw, if it's a mistake, will permanently haunt you in the paper. If you do make a mistake that you can't erase or adjust, then you could just grab a new piece of paper and start over again. Don't treat your work so precious. Right, we're just exploring. So now what I'm looking at, not so much the shape of the face, so much as the shape of the negative space next to the nose into the eye socket. It's got a nice kind of inward curve here from the tip of the nose in, right? So that's what I'm going to try to capture here. Right? Got that curve. Just like that. And then at the same time, we have another curve in this image that goes back over this way. So we're going to do the same thing here. Get another curve. Another reverse curve. This one's a little more slight. Followed by another major curve. And what I'll do is I'll extend the top of the head just a little bit more. Now my photo reference cuts it off, but we can assume that the head goes up just a little bit higher than the photo. And we'll arc it back down to that neck area there. Now the gorilla that we're looking at here is a female gorilla. Their facial structures are slightly different, more compressed than a male. Males have larger skulls. Their heads go much higher. They definitely have a higher back portion, top portion of the skull. So the females are a little more compressed, shrunk down comparatively. All right. So we have the basic head structure taken care of in here. What we can do to help cut it off even more is we can look to where the shoulder in the image starts, where it starts to separate from the neck, which is a slanted line from the eye socket. And it starts somewhere about here. We could just draw a little marker here so that we can test it out, see if that looks like the right spot. And then if we pay attention to this line, it starts going diagonally and then it curves down right when we get to the back area of the chin, which I've probably drawn just a little too far. So I'll correct that now. So we'll go down at an angle, and then we'll curve. Now, this is usually something you want to avoid, where you have two lines that touch, because it creates a bit of a flat image. It's always better to overlap or create a separation. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an overlap. So I'm going to have it extend a little further down, and then overlap over here and curve. This is where we make adjustments, and we don't want to necessarily be overly committed to our photo reference. Because sometimes things in nature do crisscross the way that we talked about before. They intersect, they create what are called tangents. It's when you have two lines that touch, or points and angles that do this kind of a thing. It could even be something like this. We don't usually want this kind of a intersection of the lines because it becomes hard to tell where one thing starts and where one begins. So in those circumstances, right, it's better to have some overlap and decide which line is going to be on top and which one's going to be on the bottom. Or something like this, right? Rather than having them intersect. This helps your image to not feel flat. So avoid tangents. Okay. So now that we've got this head shape taken care of, what we want to do is start adding some little details, right? And this is where tone and value are going to come in. So if you have a pencil and you want to start filling this in a little bit, here's what we can do. Right, couple different ways to think about this. The background I've chosen is a mid-tone. If you're working on a background and it's more of a white, right? If I come in here and you're drawing on a background and your image looks like this, you're going to treat it a little differently than if your background is a mid-tone like what I'm drawing on, right? So if you're working on a white background, you can't get any brighter than the white, and so you're going to use the white as your highlight area of the brightest spots. Anywhere you see something really bright, you're going to allow that white paper to shine through. Now in this case, the brightest thing on this photo reference is the background. We're not really going to be drawing backgrounds today. It's really just going to be sketching gorillas and having fun. So I'd say you can lean into the highlight areas of the fur around the ear or the back of the head, maybe just a touch on the nose and the eyebrow there, bottom lip, just areas that help to define. I like working on a mid-tone because we're already kind of in that zone where I can, if I draw white, I can get that highlight. And if I draw something dark, now I've got a shadow, right? And I've got all these different colors in between to play around with, right? I've got a whole range of colors in grayscale that I can use to really add life to this sketch. Now, if you're using a pencil, chances are you're going to do something where, you start sketching in, and the harder you press, the darker it gets, right? And the lighter you press, the lighter it gets. Something along those lines. Okay? For you, if that's what you're doing, I recommend holding the pencil like, how do I say it? Holding it on its side so that you're drawing with the long flat edge of the pencil rather than the tip. What this will allow you to do is to naturally sharpen your pencil tip. It'll stay sharp if you draw on the side, and you can just keep rotating it around to maintain that sharpness. Or if you draw with a tip, you're really just kind of stuck with that singular hard edge. But with the side, you can fill in larger areas. Now for me, it's a little different because I'm using digital, and so my brush is the size that it is until I change it. And so to kind of give that sideways look here, right, this is what your pencil will look like if you're drawing on the side versus using the tip, which will give you something more like this. Broader strokes are good for fills and shading and value. The tip is good for fine details and refining. So think about that as you're drawing today. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come in and I'm going to start drawing in some of these values. So I'm going to go with something a little dark. If you're working digitally like I am, I recommend leaving the sketch layer above your drawing. Sorry, your painting or your fills. So I add a new layer and I drag it beneath my sketch layer. I can test it before I start to make sure that this is in fact the layer that I mean to be on top. The sketch layer, good. I'm going to select the layer I made that I dragged beneath it. I can turn that on and off and see if anything happens. I don't have any painting on it yet, so I know that that's the right layer. Just make sure that it's highlighted and selected if you're drawing digitally so that you're on the right layer. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and start filling in some of the value here. Paying attention to the areas that are darkest. Not trying to be overly perfect, just trying to get those sense of shape. The darkest areas are going to be the ones that are least exposed to the light. And that's going to vary based on the shape of the face, or whatever you happen to be drawing at that moment. Okay, we've got the ear up in here. Got the area of the neck. It's darkest over here. Some rough dark shadow area where the fur kind of sticks out causes the light to get blocked a bit. Then we've got more shadowy area up here. Remember, it's going to be darkest based on my observation where the light is not hitting directly. So see how that blank area that I'm not drawing in is looking brighter than the rest just because of the background? That's what we're looking for. And something else that's important to note is that you don't have to capture every single detail every time you make a drawing. In fact, many drawings and paintings are more appealing when edges are what's called lost, when something isn't overly defined. It gives our brains and our eyes guessing room, and our brains like to do that. They don't always like everything exactly straightforward. It's almost like when you're reading a mystery novel. You don't want to know who did it right from page 1. And the story's boring. Giving your brain something to kind of play around with and tease out as you draw along. That's what keeps you interested. Okay. I'm going to emphasize that rounded top lip and probably extend that bottom lip. You can resize things as you draw to make them feel a little more like what you're looking for. Totally fine. And it's okay if it varies from the photo reference a little bit. The most important thing is that when we're looking at it, we can see a gorilla. If you're looking at your gorilla drawing and you see an elephant, chances are you've done something wrong. We'll draw a little bit of the shoulder here. Shoulder is going to be lighter. Adds contrast there. It's going to be darkest on the face right next to that shoulder there. This is where we can be a little more dark and forceful with our pencil pushes. And something else to think about is when you're drawing, sometimes it's helpful to draw the lines in the direction that you see the shapes form on your reference. Using reference is a good thing, especially when you're learning, and even when you're not learning anymore, just to maintain accuracy. We all have mental pictures of what we think things look like, but if you were just to draw from your mind, chances are you'd have a very, very exaggerated or simplified version of whatever you were trying to draw. If you're going for something stylistic, then that's fine. But if you're trying to go for a sense of realism, even if it's just a touch of it, it's always best to use reference. Now, if you wanted to maintain its originality, something you could do is draw from your mind first, and then use photo reference to help correct your image. To point out the areas that aren't quite exact. Okay, so we've got this sketch, and it's looking okay, but now we need to refine. And this is where it's going to start to feel a little more alive. So if you're working digitally, this is where I'd say shrink down your brush size. And I would say go to a lighter tone, not completely white, something a little more mid-tone, something brighter than your background, and something that's definitely brighter than the shadows that you just put in. Okay. And for refining, what I like to do is I like to tone down the sketch layer. I like to lower the opacity so I can just kind of see it still. My shadow layer should have taken care of most of the image structure. And then I'm going to add a layer on top. And so this layer right here, layer 1, is my sketch layer. Layer 3 is my shadows, or my overall value layer. And then layer 4 is my refining layer. And once again, this is just studies. These are studies, this is practice, this is just getting you to be able to draw the thing that you're looking at. In this case today, it's gorillas. Okay, so now I'm going to come in, and I might even make this smaller. I'm going to start paying attention to the shapes that I see on the nose here. Gorilla noses from the tip to the bridge are actually quite wrinkled. They have a lot of folds in their skin. So, just going to loosely incorporate that. There's also a bit of a highlight up in here. So I'll incorporate that too. Just being light, gently sculpting this in, allowing those edges to not be overly defined. Okay. Up in here on the face, gonna get some more of that. It's gonna wrap around the outside of the eye socket here. Connect again with the bottom of the brow. It's all going to be kind of subtle. Nothing overly defined. Start adding value to the top here. To the front of the tip. It's okay to bounce back and forth as long as you're paying attention to what shapes you're making and where they go. I want to get that highlight on the bottom lip here. Okay. Got some highlights down this way. Drawing the hair is essentially, you know, paying attention to the angle, keeping them close together, right? If we draw hair like this, it's not going to actually look like hair, right? Think about the way that the image looks here. Those hairs are close together and they form around an angle and they overlap, right? So something more like this is going to give you a sense of hair where this won't, right? This is like when we were back in kindergarten and we thought that this is what hair looked like, right? Or similarly, when we thought hair looked like this, right? Overly simplified and exaggerated. Pay attention to your photo reference. Go ahead and erase that. Grab some of the hair over here. Paying attention to the way it curves, where it's coming from, how long the strands are. Don't be afraid to vary the angle. And definitely don't be afraid to have it fade into other areas of the face. So if you notice, I'm pressing harder on the areas that I want to have show up brightly. Now for those who are using a pencil and paper and your background's white, remember what we said before, that we want these areas to be highlighted. So what do? Right? How do we get that highlight on here? Well, something you could do is use your eraser. Okay. If I come in here and I use the edge of my eraser, I can still get those shapes. I can still get those angles and carve out those fur areas, right? It doesn't have to be a white pencil, And it doesn't have to be perfect from the start. Let's see, it's a lot of overlapping. Paying attention to the length and size of your brush, or your eraser, or the stroke that you're using. Okay. See that? Can do the same over here. So, you don't even need anything more than a pencil and an eraser to get this effect done. And you just keep playing around with it until you get what you like. And the best part about just using a pencil and paper is that if you erase it and you're not happy with it, well, you just come back in and you draw more. Doesn't have to be all that crazy, right? You can add some sharper contrast by coming back in with a darker press and allowing that to kind of fade into the rest of it, right? Same on the eye area. Something I like to do to help add realism is to touch up the outside edges of hairy creatures like gorillas and just go really lightly and add fur with different angles and curves. Paying attention to the photo reference, but playing around a little bit too. Because if you can get this, this helps make your image a bit more interesting. It also makes it feel more alive. Gives the eye more to look at. Same over here. We could use an eraser for some of these areas and a dark edge for some of the other ones. Same for the ear. Carving some of those darker shapes near the bright ones to get more contrast. Allow some of those other areas to remain kind of in that middle zone. like we talked about before, not everything has to be overly defined. But for the darkest edges, don't be afraid to go back in and emphasize those and have them fade into the midtones. I'm going to increase the size of my brush over here. Allow for more of these dark areas to stay prominent. Remember, paying attention to that photo reference. Block it in little by little. Any areas that I feel need to be a little more dark, just go back over those till I get the overall feel that I'm looking for here with the shadow. Okay. So, not a bad study. Got a lot going for it, and I think we can move on to a different image. This time we'll pick on an image that's a little different than the side profile. grab this one. Now sometimes blurry images are not the best to go from, and other times they're great because it allows us to focus on the value rather than the defining details, right? So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to go ahead and keep moving through with another image. Okay. All right, so moving on. Let's do this gorilla and keep the same brush. I'm going to try to keep it very pencil-like. Once again, aiming for that side pencil, right? Grabbing it and letting it be drawn from the side of it instead of the tip, right? So overall facial structure. Once again we have kind of oval. For the overall shape. Okay. Thinking about where the main structure of the head is, that Loomis circle area, it's going to be kind of in this area here. Right? And what I like to do when I'm looking at the front is after I get that basic head structure taken care of, which is going to be, this is at a slight angle, right? So if I'm thinking about it, I'm adding kind of like a rounded rectangle to the top here and allowing it to curve down. Right about there. The chin comes to a point. Over this way. And it curves back up into this over here. And then there's a little bit of a jut where that fur hangs out a little bit. There's also a bit of fur that gets extended over on this side. Starting up here, coming right to about there. You can choose to put that in, you can choose to leave it out. I would describe this part of the head as not completely necessary information, so much as the face, right? This head might even be down a little bit more from where I had it before. Okay, now everything as part of this image goes is at an angle. It's slanted, right? We can see from the top of the head over here that it's slanted. So I'm going to try to capture that same angle over here. I think about the brow first. Gorilla brows are a very strong defining characteristic of their face. We can see from this side profile that we did before that the brow juts out quite a lot. And so even if we only had, you know, the front part of this to go off of, we could probably still tell it was a gorilla, even with it, like 3/4 of this image not visible, right? In fact, let's play around with that for a second. Let me add a layer here. I'm going to color pick the background. And I'm going to grab a big brush. And we'll see, can we tell it's still a gorilla? Can't you still tell that that's a gorilla face? This is what I'm talking about with those key features, right? Certain things are very important to identifying what something is. Okay, so let's continue on with this. So we've got the strong brow. It's at an angle. Something else that's a strong feature is the nose. So a couple different ways we can go about this, right? I could draw the angle of the face here. Try to capture that swoop of the nose. I want to pay attention to where the lip comes down, which is probably somewhere around here. And it curves up over in this area. Let's think of this facial structure as kind of like a triangle. So we'll go from the brow, we'll draw an angle right to the corner of this curve that we drew for the mouth. And we'll do the same on the other side, like that. This is going to help us to find the right spatial distance for the landmarks. Okay? Now, the top of the nose is going to be about halfway between the tip of the brow and the point of the lip. So somewhere around here, right? It can go a little higher, but typically it's going to be somewhere like there. Now, what do I notice when I look at the shape of the nose? If I'm paying attention to the curves of the nostrils here, gorillas have a bit of a heart shape, right? A cartoon heart, not an anatomical heart. So I'm going to do a curve that way, and a curve this way. Okay. Then I'm also going to continue that heart shape down over here with another curve and another curve. Now pay attention to the photo reference, right? Really figure out where those landmarks go. Same goes for the nostrils themselves. These are going to come at a sharper angle and almost connect. Going to curve out this way and this way, like an M. And then they're going to do something different. They're going to hard cut toward the tip again. The nostril on the right, because it's closer to camera or our viewpoint, this is going to be just slightly larger than the left. It should be felt rather than seen, meaning that we should get the feeling that this one's bigger, even if we don't necessarily have to measure it to find out. Just looking for other defining details here. And then we have the nose that kind of comes up from the tops of these peaks. We get those wrinkles. And then here's the other thing about gorilla faces. It's a bit of a curve again. It's going to go from the brow and swoop down to about the top of the nostril there. And we can't really see it on this side, but we can draw it in as a safe assumption that it's going to do the same thing over here. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the top of the brow. Somewhere around there. Going to have it curve over this way. Grab some of the curve over here. Okay. And I'm looking for that far edge side of the face because the brow goes along with it, and it's going to kind of come down and curve ever so slightly and curve back in. And this lip is going to overlap. Remember what we talked about with the other one. We don't want tangents. And so having this front lip overlap a bit is going to give us a little more depth. Okay. Can do the same thing over here and have it round out just a little bit more. Now hopefully so far you can still tell that your sketch here is a gorilla shape and it doesn't look like a lion or some other kind of creature. Next we'll go ahead and finish off the top part of the brow. The top part of the brow is going to be fairly straight. You can curve it slightly. Give it some different angles here just so it doesn't look too flat, but honestly if we're looking at that image it's fairly straight across. We just don't want to lose the angle, right? It should match the top of the head or come close to it, right? So this kind of a thing. Top of the head, top of the brow. Should be more or less the same, parallel to each other. The other thing we want to point out here is the skull, the first ridge in it. It's going to be up about here. Okay, so we'll come up and we'll define this area just a little bit. And then we can have it fade off and lose it again. It's totally fine. We don't need to finish it all the way. If you find that your skull is just a little out of proportion, you can go ahead and add more thickness or cut it down on one side. Whatever you think looks right, whatever is convincing you that what you're looking at is a gorilla, that's what you should stick with, okay? Alright, now here's the other thing. Part of this facial area here is cheekbone, and part of it is socket. So if we're looking, gorilla eyes actually come pretty high up in terms of this shape. And so I'm going to try to draw the socket, and I'm going to draw an inner curve. Okay, it should be up near the top, and it should swoop in like a half circle and come right into that bridge of the nose. It should not stretch all the way over to the outside of the face. Now, the reason why it comes over to the bridge on this side is because we're getting part of it blocked off by that bridge. On this side, we're actually going to have a little bit of a separation because this side is closer. Now we can't really see this eye all that well in the photo reference, but it's going to be somewhat over here. Okay, we're going to get that same kind of shape. See a little bit more of it and curve it up. Okay, and if we need to adjust any of the width or anything like that on this side to make it more accurate, to make it feel a little more natural, we can do that. Anything that doesn't look right, make sure you go in and make those adjustments until you think it looks better. Okay. And then we've got more bridge construction. Like we talked about before, gorilla noses and faces are actually quite wrinkly and foldy with their skin. I know, super technical terms here. So we want to make sure that we kind of loosely incorporate some of that. Let's come down to the bottom of this top lip here. What we're going to do is we're going to draw a little curved line to indicate where the bottom lip juts out. And taking a look at the nose, we're going to think about those curves again, those shapes. Redefine them a little bit and allow the curves to come out on their own so that we don't get a tangent in here, right? Something like that. Makes it feel a little more organic when they're not completely connected in that way. Correcting some of the angles that I see that I would like them to be a little thicker or thinner. Along those lines. Same thing up over here. Okay. The other thing we can do is just a light indication here. It's almost like angling out like rays of sunlight from the top of the brow to indicate that that's how the fur is going, because that's how the fur will be distributed. Comes out from that area there. And in this image, the ear is a little hard to see, but it's right over here on the right hand side. It's about 2/3 of the way over from the edge of the face. So somewhere right around here, and the angle is putting it just a little bit higher than the top of the brow, and it comes down to just above the bottom of it. And it's more felt than seen, so we're just going to darken that area in a little bit. We'll shade it. Okay. So that's where our ear will go. And now that we have the structure, the basic facial structure here, we can start doing our value layer. Remember, this is where we can come in with the side of our pencil and start filling in some other areas. So working digitally, I'm just going to put this below my sketch layer. Increase the size of my brush so that it's like I'm using the side of my pencil. And then we'll go ahead and start filling in the extra dark areas first. So if we look at the right side of the face, so much of that is very much in shadow that a lot of those details are very hard to see. So I'm going to use that to my advantage. Color that in to help some of those other features stand out more prominently. Right? Now remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're just paying attention to where the lights and darks fall. And the photo reference we're using today, I took myself. If you want to continue your guerrilla studies on your own, practicing what we're talking about today, I recommend using photo reference that you take on your own. That way you don't have to worry about rights or anything like that. Another good place if you're not able to photograph gorillas where you live is to go to stock sites and check their terms. One of the ones that I like to use for sketching and reference and practice is a site called Pexels. That one's free. I think there's also Pixabay. And if you use a paid site like Adobe Stock, that can be helpful as well. Just make sure that whatever you're using, you always credit the original person who photographed or the site that you take it from, if you don't take it yourself. It's just the proper thing to do. It saves you from getting in trouble. And always pay attention to what your rules and regulations are when using that kind of content. Check it over for yourself. Make sure you understand it before you go ahead and do anything with it. But just remember, someone took the time to create that image, to capture it the way that they did. It's just right to give them credit. It can be helpful to draw areas around your face to help them stand out a little bit more too. This helps the face to stand out a little bit more prominently. I would say don't lose the edge. That helps define the face shape when you're coloring in those outside areas. We don't want to lose structure. Okay. Color this area in a little darker around the eye. Right. This is where all that value really plays in, right? Trying to get those facial shapes, understanding depth and where light is touching. Just a little bit of light and dark without being overly detailed can help a lot. Okay. I'm going to shrink this down a little bit. I would say use the point of your pencil for the nose. Trying to get the nostril shapes a little more solidified in here. Pay attention to those curves. Think about the shape that those nostrils are making, how far they come over. Where does the shadow blend? Where is it the strongest? And then what other shadow shapes are present up in this nose area here? Use those to your advantage. Help define some of those other wrinkly shapes. Now we can get more detailed around the eyes. Really just paying attention to lights and darks and just emphasizing those, right? So we have to do at this stage. Bottom of the bottom lip. Bottom of the top. Something along those lines. Playing around with the brow a little bit, helping to give that some more dimension. There we go. Okay. Now, I like to zoom in when I'm looking at facial features, just so I can be sure that I'm not missing anything important. Okay, so something I'm noticing here is that my outside edge is a little too rounded, so I'll come back in with my eraser and I'll gently take some of that away. Like that. The other thing to note about Gorilla Brows is that they're a bit wrinkled as well, similar to the bridge of the nose. And so anywhere we can get those, what I like to do is curve my pencil or my eraser. Anywhere we can get those defining curves of the brow to act like skin wrinkles, it's going to help our brow to look a little more natural. Don't be afraid to erase. You can always draw it again. I'm looking at this area here. And it's looking like some of the sketch lines that I drew before are a little too prominent, so I'll have to go back and erase some of those perhaps. Gonna blend this. Maybe make my eraser just a little bit bigger. See that? Doing some further erasing to get more texture in here. Thinking about where the light hits brightest and at what angle. I like to go outward from the nose area to capture some of those nose highlights. That's another area I'll probably have to come back on the sketch layer and do some more erasing with. I'm gonna grab the bottom lip there, add a little bit more of a highlight. Just a little bit of a highlight down here on the bottom of the chin that's getting this light. Come up here, think about where that bottom lid of his eye curves. Where it comes in over here. And then where that eye comes through. It's a lot more subtle on this side, but we're still going to do a little bit of erasing. Really try to make sure that we can capture the eye on this side. And here's where we can zoom out a little bit, see how that's looking. Definitely looking like a gorilla. So I'll go back to my sketch layer. And I'll erase some of the things in here. Shrink that down, go back to the shadow layer, just help define that lid a little more on the edge and the glint. There might be too much on the right side. Can't see a whole lot here, but we can see just a little bit. It's probably enough to help. Come back in and help touch even more erase marks on some of the areas of the nose that are going to get that direct light. Go back to the sketch layer and emphasize them. It's a little too bright for that nose. Okay. We can do some outside hair. Come back to the shadow layer. Get some of that going there. Not too much, just enough to help point out that this is hair. Do the same on both sides. Definitely don't want to overdo it. Remember what we talked about before, keeping them kind of close together, angling them around the shapes. It's going to be the best way to add a sense of hair here. We'll zoom out, take a look. There we go. I can probably turn off the sketch layer. No, we'll keep it on. So here's what we'll do. To help separate these a little bit, because this is digital, we'll go ahead and move this over a bit. And move this over a bit. And there we go. So those are our gorillas for today. Value is probably the most important thing that you can add to your image. It creates a sense of depth. So whatever you draw, make sure you apply that knowledge of light and value and shadow to your drawings. And all you really need is a pencil and an eraser. If you can fill in an area and erase away detail and add detail, and that's all you really need to do. So I hope you found this helpful. I hope that you love gorillas as much as I do. And I hope that you have a great rest of your Wednesday. Thanks for being here. If you like my work, if you like my style, make sure to check out my website, jwkcreates.com. I have a whole bunch of things that you can buy there. And I also offer commissions through Fiverr, so you can check out my stuff. But I've got prints, I've got products like mugs and hats and hoodies and shirts and other things that you can buy of my art and my photography. I've also got links to my live streams that you can follow anytime, and about me, all that kind of stuff. And new products will be dropping pretty soon, so keep an eye out for those. But thank you for your support. Thank you for watching me today, and I hope that you have a great Wednesday. Bye, everybody.